All this we're calling this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Now it's that email there. Oh, okay. That sounds like we still have some people coming into the meeting here.
I don't mean, sorry.
Okay. All right. Welcome and introductions. Discussion question. What has come up for you since our last meeting? I mean, if I may just say something real quickly, just to start off. I just wanted to express my sadness for Deputy Mayor Bodie. I just, publicly, I just want to say that I'm sad that she's no longer with us. So I very much respected her and her work, and so that's what I'd like to say is who else would like to share?
Well, I would. As you know, the Climate Hub is, the outline for the mural is done. We're gonna paint on can do a community painting project on June 1st. We're just starting to get the Urban Artworks is gonna manage the sign up, so people sign up for an hour and paint for an hour, and we haven't gotten that quite finalized yet. But probably have something out tomorrow for people, and we'll send it out to people, so it's very exciting. And the other thing is that a piece of that is, as you probably recall, we applied to the American Geophysical Union Thriving Earth Exchange for a project that we're working on to put in the Climate Hub, which would be local citizen science displayed somehow, we think, on a touchscreen TV of some sort, if we can get touchscreen TV. But we had the orientation today, and we're moving ahead with that project. That'll give us, we have to refine our project a little bit. Then they're going to find a scientist within the American Geophysical Union to work with us on big data visualization.
That's not so much fun. Are we doing introductions?
What's come up for you?
Just that. We had our annual Arbor Day event hosted by the Tree Board a couple weeks ago. That was awesome. It was 10 times more people than we've had at any of our previous events. We had about 40 people there. It was really cool to see. As a collaboration with a couple other local groups and lots of folks interested in our parks, our trees, the new community park going up in Horizon View Park. So it was just great to see people coming out and sort of connecting with their neighbors and getting excited about our urban forest. So
I'll do a horrible one. I've done nothing but work since our last meeting, so I can't think of one that's unique. But thank you for the open house, Cascadia. I met Matt there. Nice to meet you. We'll catch up. Had a meeting with Yanni last night, Planning Commission, and we recommended the middle housing and accessory dwelling unit development amendments to the city council last night. So that's a huge milestone, one of the top 5 priority projects. So everything's going swimmingly.
Oh yeah, Yana, you're muted.
Oh, that's weird. It unmuted, then it muted. Huh, okay. First of all, apologies for not being there in person. I'm having some lower back issues and I'm going to be kind of getting up and walking around a bit. So I'm going to just do this from here. I kind of wanted to build off of what David brought up. And I'm actually thinking about a couple of people, Councilmember Bodie or Deputy Mayor Bodie, but also State Senator Bill Ramos, who has been extremely supportive of, sustainability, environment, restoration, some of the stuff I work on in my professional life. He, of course, or some of you may know, he's also the husband of King County Council member Sarah Perry, So that's been, as a county employee, that's been, just a hard hit. I have a lot of respect for both of them, for Sarah Perry and for Bill Ramos. But what I want to say about that is it's just this reminder about how we sometimes can take these certain leaders for granted, a bit, and expect them to be there to, voice those perspectives that we like to hear and that we kind of depend on. And it's a really good reminder that you always have to have a bench. You always have to have people coming up, whether it's, volunteers like most of us, on these committees, or people, running for public office, or, whatever else, or in our roles in our work, if we happen to work in things that affect this work directly, like as I do, I have the privilege to do. And certainly the Cascadia team works with a lot of, public sector clients and so forth. So it's just, having a few of these big losses of public leaders has just made me, think again about how important it is that, we all keep doing this work at whatever level we do it. And, that's what keeps it all moving forward. So those are my not super uplifting, but still thoughts for the day. Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else? Stacy, Alexandra?
I just reiterate what Victoria said. That's actually what I was going to say, Victoria, just how inspiring our little Arbor Day event was. I've never seen so many people participate. And also, I just want to say, Mark Hoffman, thank you for working tirelessly for our city and all that you do.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. So the agenda. Just looking at new business, we're going to introduce future emissions. Actually, Alexandra and the team will introduce the future emissions forecast and wedge analysis, and review and discuss draft climate elements, goals, and policies. For old business, it's the engagement. We'll look at the engagement updates and review action items from the April meeting. Any questions about the agenda? Do I hear a motion to accept the agenda as is? Second? All in agreement?
I
Thank you. Next on our agenda is review and approve meeting minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? I do have a change. But I was not at the meeting. Although it's indicated that I was at the meeting, so we will change that, request that change, yeah. And thank you to Anne for covering. Any other changes, recommendations? Okay, so with the change that I was not there, is there a move? Can we move with the notes?
I'll move to accept the notes as written.
Thank you. Second. All in agreement? Okay, thank you. Public comments. Is there anyone who, other than, I don't think that we have anyone. Just Matt. Just Matt. Yeah. Does Matt want to speak?
I mean, Matt always wants to speak, but again, I think the process says no comments from people on Zoom, so I'd prefer to respect the process. Great to be here tonight, though.
Yeah, okay, it's at city council that way, so all the other committees are
Okay.
bearing that.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for respecting the rules.
Matt's not known for that, so this is a special moment.
Okay, so moving forward then, new business. Oh, actually, just one other thing. So actually we'll come back to that. So new business. Alexander, would you like to kick off with new business?
Yeah, happily. Okay, I'll get my screen shared here. And as we dive in, hit share. hit the share button. Okay, great. Technology. You'd think we'd be adjusted to it by now. Okay, so as we dive into the new business tonight, first of all, I'll let Alicia, you can introduce yourself in a moment here, and then just want to remind folks that so we are hoping to spend the bulk of our time together tonight talking about the goals and policies. And so for this introduction to the future emissions forecast and the wedge analysis, just a quick reminder, we're going to do our best to kind of keep this as high level as possible and demonstrate how it connects to the goals and policies process. And of course, want to take any questions that you'll have, but we'll try to keep it within the 10 to 15-ish minute mark. And yeah, we'll have lots of time for questions as part of the goals discussion, goals and policies, but maybe I'll start turn it over to you, Alicia, for an intro and diving into this emissions forecast.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you for teeing us up. And hi, everybody. I'm Alicia Fennell with the Cascadia team, focusing on a lot of our different climate planning work, but including this emissions analysis piece, which is what we'll be talking about over these next 10 to 15 minutes or so. And so we'll dive in here to the an overview of the emissions analysis or a future emissions forecast, which we also call the wedge analysis. So the wedge analysis basically forecasts our anticipated future greenhouse gas or GHG emissions and looks at those emissions under the 3 different emissions reduction scenarios described on this slide. So that first one, and this will also all be shown visually in just a couple slides. That first scenario is the business as usual or BAU scenario, which forecasts emissions based on Lake Forest Park's 2023 greenhouse gas emissions profile and then growth assumptions, but assuming no climate action at the local, state, or federal level. That second scenario is the adjusted business as usual or the ABAU scenario, which does account for expected emissions reductions or impacts from a few different key federal and state and sometimes regional policies. So it still assumes no climate action at the local or city level, but it does take into account some of those big federal and state policies that impact emissions. And then the last piece, the last scenario and piece that we'll look at tonight is the local action scenario, which models the expected impact of a few draft climate element policies on the remaining emissions. So we'll see these results visually on the next slide, but we first wanted to take a moment to talk about what we're comparing these future emissions against. So this next slide, the wedge figure we'll see in a moment, will include a dotted line at the bottom to represent the city's emissions reduction targets, or where we want the city's emissions to be in a few key milestone years. So the targets are shown on this slide. And one thing to note that we wanted to flag tonight is that we are recommending shifting to a 2019 baseline instead of 2007 to have a baseline for a year that we have actual greenhouse gas emissions inventory data for. This approach has been taken by other K4C cities using a 2019 or just other kind of more recent inventory year for which they have data. And this approach is approved by Commerce, especially given that these targets shown on the slide still aim for that net zero by 2050. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this, the preliminary results from the wedge analysis. And we'll walk through this very busy full slide here. So at the very top of the screen, you'll see like in the title section that we're looking at core emissions with this. So what we mean by that is that we're looking at basically a subset of emission sources that cities generally have more control over at the local level. So these sources include electricity, natural gas, on-road vehicles, and solid waste. So looking at the actual figure here, that top dotted line, black dotted line at the top, represents the BAU or business as usual or no action future. So that's where we see emissions projected to increase about 26% by 2050 compared to 2019 as the baseline, which again is assuming no federal, state, or local climate action. So just thinking about if we kind of are in a vacuum, but there's some growth happening, what would happen to emissions? So below that, all those solid color wedges represent the ABAU or the adjusted business as usual, which is the reductions in emissions that we expect from state, federal, and regional policies that are included in this analysis. And yeah, thanks for that laser pointer so you can see the list of the policies included on the right-hand side. And so when we're considering the expected or assumed impacts of all of these policies, we then expect Lake Forest Park's total greenhouse gas emissions to decrease about 56% by 2050 compared to that 2019 baseline. And that's, if you look at that kind of bright pinkish line, that's where we see those expected emissions to be. So then lastly, the last kind of scenario that we introduced here is the expected impact of a few climate element policies or strategies, which are shown in those smaller dotted colorful wedges near the bottom. So when considering the anticipated impacts of a few of these draft climate element strategies, the total greenhouse gas emissions are expected to decrease about 65% by 2050, again, compared to that 2019 baseline. And we wanted to point out, you'll notice that there's that big solid gray area at the bottom, which represents what we call the emissions gap, or basically the space between those projected future emissions and the city's targets in that dashed red line. So this gap is, the focus of this climate element, a lot of your climate planning work already, and essentially can be filled through strong policy, and whether that's at the state, federal, or local level, or ideally a combination. And we'll get into this on the next slide, but by 2050, natural gas in buildings is expected to be the largest source of remaining emissions. And so this next slide actually is just looking at the what's left piece in those key years of 2030, 2040, and 2050 after we account for the expected impacts of federal, state, and local policies. So by 2050, the most significant expected remaining emissions source is natural gas, which, as shown on this slide in that rightmost column, is expected to make up about 92% of all 2050 remaining emissions in the city. So the next steps in this process, we're not done. Again, we're trying to just introduce it tonight, but the next steps will involve vetting some of these initial assumptions with city staff, and then really continuing to refine draft climate element policies, which again is a big focus of the rest of this evening with you all. And so I want to, I should have said this at the start, this is a lot of information, and a lot of this information is easier to digest also when you've got it in front of you and have a chance to really dig in. And we are working on a summary memo that will also include a lot more detail on some of the assumptions used, which more information on those policies analyzed and included. And again, just all of this in, written form where you can really dive in and see. So we can pause for questions for a few minutes, but I just wanted to acknowledge that it's a lot of information, and we'll also, I know sometimes it's helpful to ask questions when you've actually had a chance to look at a summary memo and digest it a bit more. But I'll go ahead and pause here for a moment and see if we do have any questions or things folks want to flag, which can also include, ways that we make sure to address potential questions or clarifications in the summary memo that we're working on right now.
Question on the wedge diagram in, first of all, I think the federal vehicle registry regulations may be gone, right? I mean, aren't they changing all those regulations? And the other is just, let's make sure I understand this wedge diagram correctly. That the space that's gray on the bottom in sort of the local area, those are intended to be addressed by the climate element policies? So that's what you said?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And that's, I would love to clarify that. So the small little dotted colorful wedges are what we assume is addressed by the current draft climate element policies. So the big gray space is really like what's left even after that. What's left that, you know, is currently not quite addressed through climate element policies or through state and federal policies.
Climate element policies that are in the comp plan already sort of embedded?
So these are just the draft climate element policies that you all are going to be diving into and workshopping and providing feedback on tonight.
The next section, but
So then, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be too dense, but it turns out it is. That the only thing that the climate policies will be addressing is those dotted ones?
Currently, that's what we're assuming, yes. And so, and this is, you know, an interesting point too, because, and I guess I didn't respond yet to your earlier point about federal policies and, you know, what's still standing, what can we expect to be fully implemented. But what we often are seeing, especially in, you know, in Washington, where there are strong state policies, is that state and federal policies often get us a lot of the way there. You know, there's really huge impacts from some of these policies. And so those policies at the local level, you know, they actually, in some ways, they've got a harder job of getting those like last harder to decarbonize emission sources. And with the federal policy, I mean, I think this is just a bigger question right now. And we're kind of thinking about how we can account for that in our models. And, you know, do we just acknowledge that it's all uncertain? And of course, this is assuming, you know, compliance with, and this is assuming that these policies stand. And, you know, so I think it's absolutely a bigger and broader question that you're bringing up. And it's something that we're very much thinking about as we, you know, and as we talk about these like expected emissions reductions kind of as of right now. And maybe we need to think about how to communicate that with a bit more uncertainty or acknowledging that the policy landscape is changing for sure.
So Alicia, from my understanding, what you're saying is that the gray areas, it's the opportunity that we have in front of us in discussing the policy recommendations in the next conversation. We can't do a whole lot about the other areas because that's federal, it's all unknown.
I think she said we're only doing the ones with the little dots on it.
Well, but the bottom area.
I think yes to both. I think that gray area is the opportunity. And you know, the little dot wedges are, you know, our current assumptions for the current draft policies, which I think the opportunity is, you know, are there ways that those policies that we can add more policies, we can strengthen policies. It's often a really hard balance, you know, it's like how much do we mandate and require things, which can be tough, versus how much do we incentivize things. So I think you are both, I'm agreeing with both of you in that it's the current draft climate element policies are represented in those smaller dotted wedges. And I think the gray area is, you know, the opportunity wedge. I like that kind of framing for the local level and beyond.
So if we were talking about this, in the past, when I've looked at these wedge diagrams, you talked about that above the pink line was sort of what the federal and the state would take care of, and below was what the local, but now you're saying that that's not actually accurate. Is that right? So you say above is what's currently going on in the federal and the state, the little dots are what the city can do, and then there's this other stuff that might happen or needs to happen. Maybe it's an invention of something. So
I think
how we talk about it.
I think, yeah, that framing piece is big. And I guess one thing I'll clarify is that that federal piece could be bigger, right? So like if the federal government went above and beyond and added more stronger climate policy, where that pink line is would go down. And therefore kind of the area that the city would need to fill at the local level gets smaller. So that gray area, like I see that it's, you know, the federal and state and then the city and then gray. So it kind of seems like it's needing to be filled at the city level. But in theory, any of those different kind of levels of players could fill that, because if it were filled at the federal level, that, like, for example, that green wedge would just grow bigger and push down that, you know, the bright pink line of basically what is covered or accounted for at that state and federal level. I don't know if that helped at all with what you were getting at there.
I get it, but I'm just saying it's harder to talk about. That's
Definitely.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Okay. I don't hear any more questions, so let me double check. Nothing in the chat. Great. Okay. Anything else, Alicia, that we want folks to keep in mind as we move into the discussion on policy?
That's a good question. I guess the remaining emissions slide, actually, if you could go to the next slide here. You know, again, this is assuming full kind of compliance of the current policies at the state and federal level. But to me, this slide is pretty interesting and helpful in showing, you know, basically where the policy gaps are at that kind of state and federal level. And, you know, it aligns with what we know. We know that natural gas is a tough one on a lot of different levels. And that is, you know, the big source shown remaining in 2050. And, you know, at the current moment with the current policies, we expect some of these other sources to be addressed pretty well going forward, at least when we look really far forward till 2050. And then also I can think too on on that question, Alexandra, and message the two of you as you dive into the policy discussion going forward.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. Okay, so lots to keep in mind here. And then just as a quick reminder, we're going to be vetting some of these assumptions with city staff as a follow-up and continuing to build out the dotted aspect of that wedge. So great. Well, thanks so much, Alicia, for the overview. And I think with that, I just want to shift into our next topic. Thanks so much, Alicia. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you all. Bye.
Okay. And then I am just looking at my little tiny screen here. Is that Tracy? Did you join in the room?
Hello.
Awesome. Hi. Nice to see you. Okay, great. Excellent. So let's move into the bulk of our discussion tonight. And I think I'll turn it over to you, Maddie, to kick us off on the goals and policies.
Perfect.
Before we do that, Alexandra, if you don't mind, can we create some parameters on how this conversation will go? Do you want us to be asking questions as we go along, or would you like for us to wait until a certain point?
Yeah,
I
Maddie?
think we can field questions as we go. I think there's a lot of content. So the way it'll flow is that I'll give an overview, just kind of a reminder of our process. We'll go over some of the key takeaways that we've heard since the last time we met out of the survey, the open house, our conversation with city staff. And then we'll dive right into the policies and we'll go goal by goal through the 9 goals. So I'll definitely pause during each goal while we've got the policy language in front of us to see if you've got questions, comments. We've got some guiding questions for you to consider. So I think I'll pause kind of after the intro piece and then definitely goal by goal to hear any questions or comments that you've got. Thanks for
Sounds good.
asking. And also, we do have a lot of goals here, and I'd love to cover each of them. I think it's likely that there will be more to say on some of these goals versus others. So we'll move quickly through the ones where there don't seem to be a lot of comments coming up. I might move us along a little bit faster if it turns out we're running out of time. But we do have a window to continue to hear feedback from you all by email, at least through the end of this week, probably into next week as well. So we do want to hear all of your feedback, just a warning that there is a lot of content here. All right, so this is a reminder of the different components that are informing the draft goals and policies. So we've got community and city engagement, and that has looked like interviews with local organizations, youth group, a conversation with city staff, our community survey, and our open house. We've got our greenhouse gas analyses that include the inventory, the vehicle miles traveled study, and our travel market assessment. And we've got our resilience side of things. And the two components there are the climate impact summary and the vulnerability assessment that we brought some results from into the policies. And all of that has kind of built on the policy audit that showed us what policies were in place in the comprehensive plan, what local documents we could draw from, and make sure that the climate element is aligning with, just get a lay of the land before we really dove into policy development. And in the nearer term, this is our review process for the draft policies. So starting over on the left, we had our very initial list. We brought those to city staff, and we brought the same policies to the open house. Those are the same ones that we've sent to you for your opportunity to review, and the same ones that you'll see here tonight. After we hear your feedback tonight, we're going to bring all of our findings. We'll batch them all together. We'll decide what to do with them. We'll make one round of edits to the policies. We'll send those back out to you, I believe, on May 27th. With the full draft climate element. So you'll have another review period then, and we'll regroup with you at the June CPAT meeting on June 2nd. So it's a quicker turnaround than most of our CPAT meetings. And we'll have that opportunity to go through any final feedback on the element itself and any changes to the policies if you've got questions, concerns, final tweaks. And then we're looking at a June 13th deadline to revise and submit the climate element. So we're getting close here. It's been a busy month of this process. And a few takeaways. So again, we haven't fully incorporated these pieces of feedback yet. In some cases, we have cataloged where there's support for measures, but we're going to batch all of these pieces of feedback alongside yours to decide what next steps to take. So in the community survey, we were so excited by the community survey. There were hundreds of responses, and including hundreds of write-in responses, which indicates a really high level of engagement from folks. Some of the things that we heard in the survey were that the community is concerned about wildfires, smoke, and extreme heat. There were a lot of thoughts about trees and wanting to protect trees, but acknowledging that they can also cause damage in storms and can also fuel fires. Folks were concerned about emergency preparedness and wanted to prioritize preparedness for power outages. They were concerned about their physical safety when traveling. When we asked about policy priorities, when it came to resilience, folks said that they'd like us to focus on preparing for extreme weather and disasters and protecting energy supply and operation of critical infrastructure. So kind of a focus on continuity and emergency preparedness there. The top greenhouse gas emission reduction priorities that we heard were transitioning to renewable energy, promoting sustainable land use, expanding access to multimodal transportation options, and improving building sustainability. And then notably, we did get a lot of write-in answers when we asked for policy suggestions, and one of the ones that stood out the most was a repeated suggestion to hire a climate manager. There are a few differences with what we heard at the open house in terms of priorities. So at the open house, We were very excited to be there May 1st for 2 hours at Third Place Commons. Great to meet a few of you there in person as well. We counted about 20 very engaged attendees who came. I know there were a few stragglers also that preferred not to have their names written down, so it's possible there were a few other folks we didn't capture in the numbers. And what we heard there is that, again, people were really concerned about climate change impacts as a current and personal and local issue. They care about it now for themselves and their communities. They care about it here. Attendees indicated they have personally experienced impacts from heat, wildfire smoke, and flooding. When we asked about priorities, the greenhouse gas emissions priorities were a little bit different. So here we heard that folks would like to focus on green spaces and trees as an opportunity to sequester carbon and transportation options, that bolster transportation options. And renewable energy sources received the least support, even though it received the most support in our survey. And then out of resilience policy categories, protecting and restoring nature received the most support, and supporting local food systems and environmental justice and equity received the least support. When we asked about policy suggestions, we heard that folks were interested in protecting and expanding green spaces and tree canopy, which aligns with the priorities we heard in other categories from the open house. We heard interested in sustainable transportation improvements, balancing development with environmental protection, promoting energy efficiency and electrification, waste reduction practices, and building community preparedness and education. And finally, when we talked to city staff, we heard, thankfully, that policies largely resonated. We didn't hear any major concerns about feasibility, which was one of our main considerations in coming to city staff. Most of the edits were related to policy wording. We have a few clarifications to make to some of the policy language. And then we mostly wanted to highlight the policies that staff suggested adding, which we haven't added yet, but can plan to. And those policy additions that they suggested were to further emphasize climate-friendly planning for vegetation in parks and streetscapes, requiring the use of green infrastructure and low-impact development, generally to manage water resources sustainably. Looks like managing mostly in the face of drought in a few different ways, and incentivize construction and demolition, waste recycling and reuse. I'll pause here to see if there are any questions about the policies, takeaways that we've heard so far.
Can I just, this is Yannick, can I mention one thing that kind of caught my attention when I looked at the survey results? That there was sort of very little concern about drought. And the reason I mention that is that around here, drought gets declared only when it's affecting human supplies, whereas there are droughts that are, often they're affecting fish and stream flows and things way before they're affecting us. So it just kind of caught my attention that there's a lack of understanding about how we actually do suffer significant water shortages here. It's just that we prioritize the people over in-stream values like stream flow, groundwater recharge, fish, things like that. So it just might point to something that we could consider in future messaging around water use. Thanks.
Thanks, great point. I think the community input is key for thinking about communication moving forward. It's always a great sign if folks are supporting the policies that we're putting forward. It can also be a sign of misunderstanding and a need to communicate differently moving forward, and a sign that some issues might come up moving forward that we can anticipate and address. We heard in the survey, I think, a small but vocal minority that were skeptical about climate change as well. So that's something to keep in mind in communication moving forward too. And just confirming that just because folks didn't mention drought, we won't consider removing the drought-related policies that's supported in the data. As you mentioned, we know it's important for stream flow, it's important for fire fuel, and many different aspects of climate change resilience.
get to this as you get into the details of the actual draft policies. I'm glad to see that in the city feedback, most things resonated from the public comments at the open house. Was there anything that people gave negative feedback on or seemed to disagree with, not like in there?
I can speak to the station I was at that was related to the greenhouse gas emissions reduction policies. I can say the only negative feedback we really heard was that there was a desire to move faster on public transportation infrastructure. I think there were questions about why public transportation infrastructure wasn't reflected in the policies, and that's because a lot of it is ongoing outside of the scope of this climate element. But no real concern or questions or negativity about the policies we put forward. I'll ask Alexandra if you heard anything, or the other folks here who attended.
Yeah, it was on the resilience station. We didn't hear any negative feedback, just a lot of like really interesting and thoughtful dialogue and thoughtful questions. But Mark and Sarah, I know you were both there. Any reflections? And Tracy, you were at the open house too.
Just really good conversations. We were competing against the well-attended protest outside, but it's a beautiful day and we had great conversations.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for that
I think-
question.
I think, Maddie, what surprises me is, I believe what I heard is that the city staff does not have any feasibility concerns, which if I heard that correctly, I'm rather surprised by that.
Well, it's policy, the hard work comes later.
Okay.
The policy informs the very hard budget decisions, yeah.
Okay.
We asked the question at the very least. We were excited by how well attended the city staff meeting was. I think we had 9 staff people total, and there was representation from Stormwater, Public Works, the police department. Corey was there, quite a few folks. City administrator, who I would hope would speak to feasibility. All right, let's get into the policies. Here is a preview of the questions we'd love for you to consider throughout. Really anything is open for discussion at this point. The policies are organized into goals similarly to the rest of the comprehensive plan. So we'd love to know if there are any major gaps in the goal statement, missing goal categories. For the policy language, do the action verbs and the policy drivers make sense? Are any unclear? Should any be stronger? Are there any policies that stand out that seem particularly strong or effective, or any that seem weak or unnecessary and should be revised or removed? We'd like to know about missing content, again, asking about gaps in the policies or again, the goals. And then feasibility, what do you think the city could realistically implement? If you have more hesitations than we heard from city staff about feasibility, we'd love to hear them. Great, and just a preview of the draft goals. We've got 4 under resilience and 5 under greenhouse gas emissions. And just wanted to ask here, have folks had a chance to take a look at the policies? So we can spend more time reading through the policies on each slide or less time, depending on how familiar you already are with the policies, either by reading them, going to the open house. Yanni?
Yeah, thanks. I had a couple of fairly minor points, but I did look at the policies. I'm under goal 3 right now, preserve and protect Lake Forest Park water resources. I'm looking at 3.2. And this is a funny thing that seems to happen over and over, is that we keep calling out Lake Forest Park Water District. We have 3 water service purveyors in the city, or at least three that I'm aware of, fairly equally divided in terms of how big the areas are they serve. So I just would like to see us always speak to all water districts serving Lake Forest Park. Lake Forest Park Water District happens to be the only one that has a local source. It's a groundwater source, so there could be some unique policies related to them. But, you know, when we're talking about financial incentives and about tax credits and things, we should just be talking about all three or all of the water purveyors that we deal with. And actually in the goal right above that in C 3.1, I was looking at the rationale and just the sentence about the vulnerability assessment. Vulnerability assessment identified that on average, LFP residents' potable water usage is 3 times as high as the city's average on hot summer days. I'm just recommending kind of a rewrite because it's just a sentence that's not exactly clear what the sort of main point is. I think it means that on peak days, we use 3 times as much as we do in an average day, maybe meaning average throughout the year. But even absent extreme days, every municipality in the Northwest uses way more water during the summer, regardless of extreme heat. It could just be normal heat because they're watering their lawns. So just some, you know, just a little more specificity what we mean by that. And I know I had one more in here that I wanted to just mention, if I can just find it really quickly. Otherwise, I'll hand off and come back to it. Oh, down in goal 8, promote development that advances climate planning. I just wanted to note, mainly for the CPAT members who are not on the planning commission, the goal 8.1, foster transit oriented development. Also, you know, these are very consistent with what we talk about in what we're finishing right now, the middle housing discussions, but also CE 8.3, which is about eliminate parking minimums near transit oriented development. For sake of consistency, we have recommended at the planning commission that we eliminate minimum, you know, off-street parking requirements for middle housing within a half mile, where that's the current language, half mile of major transit stops. So just pointing out that there are synergies here with what's happening at the commission already, and we could choose to specifically recommend exactly the same language, in this case, half mile instead of near. Thanks, I'll stop there.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for those comments.
So
We-
Matt, jump around, or do you want to begin at the at resilience?
Sure, I think we could skip back up to the top. I think Yanni brought up some great points. In some cases, we have already corrected the language too, to refer to multiple water districts in goal 3. And appreciate that you have caught that as well. Great. Let's head into goal 1. So we'll go through here. So this is around enhancing community resilience to wildfire smoke and extreme heat by strengthening infrastructure, community systems, and natural areas to reduce impacts on residents, workers, and critical services. So here we're recognizing that wildfire smoke and heat are 3 of the key climate impacts facing Lake Forest Park. We've also heard that community members are most concerned about these. The 4 policies here are supported by the Commerce Menu of Measures, the Vulnerability Assessment, and the Community Survey, and Open House as well. One thing that we have considered as a policy that is not incorporated here yet is around resilience hubs or cooling and clean air shelters. So could raise that for consideration to add that or build on existing efforts in the city. But curious to hear again what you think about the goals, policy language, what stands out, what you like, would recommend changing.
Some of us sent stuff in. Do you want, you don't have a discussion of those questions here?
Sorry, you're a little bit quiet. I think I heard you ask how you'd like us to receive comments.
No, I already sent you comments.
Oh, okay.
I sent them a couple of days ago. So you don't want to have a discussion of, I mean, I sent them to everybody.
Yeah, Yeah, we received those, Sarah, so we will be incorporating that input in like following the meeting. You are welcome to share what you sent and we can discuss that again now. Or you can rest assured that we will be incorporating that. So if you'd like to spend time talking about any comments that you haven't provided yet, we're happy to do that as well. Totally up to you.
So if there's any clarification that you need, that's.
Or if there are pieces that you think would be generative for conversation.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I think the resiliency hubs are an important piece of what needs to go on. The cooling and heating. The Commons currently serves that function for many people during an electrical outage. And serves the city providers, places where you can charge it, but that formalization of those with the integration with emergency planning would be valuable resource.
And what do resilience hubs look like so far in the city?
They exist, but they're not, well, the infrastructure is not fully provided.
Okay.
City Hall, for instance, needs a new generator. Just by example.
But it's, I think there are resiliency hubs but they can also be, you know, the policy may be to work with neighborhood groups to create resiliency within neighborhoods. My neighbors all bought the same battery operated generator, so we can get people out of their chairs and stuff. I don't know how that's policy of the city, but it seems like there are structures that could be used.
Mhm. Is there more support for adding a policy like that?
They have standard language they can bring next time, if the consensus is to add that.
Okay. Yeah, is there a distinction between policy and recommendation? What I'm saying is like, there's things that require action. You know, as if we put a policy into place, there's some action that follows through with that. Or are there recommendations that, you know, that we're making? So I'm a little bit confused, like, are we making a recommendation? Some of these could be potential recommendations versus policies. I mean, overall, these are recommended policies, but but there's a distinction within that. I think that I'm missing.
I would characterize as these are policies, these are could,
Okay,
you know,
that's a good distinction.
versus implementation measures, and very different than development regulations, which are shall, and
Yeah.
development regulations on the far end are applied to specific projects and property. Implementation items could be more of what I think you're calling recommended. Like to implement the policy, and then here's the list of things to do that. And by the end of this year, separate from this policy activity, we will be adding an implementation chapter to the comprehensive plan. We have a draft from Planning Commission November. The council received everything and decided we need more work on that, but put that off till this year's amendment. So we flesh that out from July to December, separate from the climate element, but it could include items from this because that's the climate action plan.
And throughout this work, we are capturing feedback that falls within the implementation bucket. So we're cataloging feedback that's a little bit more detailed, or a little bit more focused than really belongs in a policy within the rationale column that you're seeing. And within, we've got a really big database. So we've captured kind of what piece of feedback we've heard where from which group. And we'll be ready to transfer that over to city staff, so that's not lost.
Thank you very much.
So I think we move forward.
Great. That said, if you see language that you don't think is appropriate for a policy, whether it's too detailed or doesn't feel feasible, let us know and we'll adjust. But great, let's move to goal 2. This is around environmental justice and community well-being in the context of climate change. This is responding to Commerce's guidance as part of the climate element to support adaptation to climate impacts consistent with environmental justice. So here we assessed policies related to community well-being and environmental justice way back when in the policy audit, and we raised a few opportunities in our memo. And in some cases, most cases, we have actually suggested moving existing comprehensive plan policies into the climate element where they seem to fit very well to address this guidance. So we wanted to make sure to put an emphasis on inclusive and participatory processes and prioritize policies that prepare the city to face climate change impact and promote economic development as well. And just worth noting that there are several other places, again, in the comprehensive plan already that encourage quality of life for residents and community vitality. These align urban growth area development with sustainability standards. They promote public parks and green spaces. They support affordable housing. This is just one place in the comprehensive plan where this is showing up with a specific climate lens. And looking at your feedback that we got by email, Sarah, thank you. Your feedback notes that the city is not establishing green jobs, may not apply here. And this policy around promoting economic development could take on a more localized flavor. That feedback we actually heard from city staff as well. So that's a piece of feedback we'll definitely be taking into account.
What's the feedback that you're giving, sir?
That the city doesn't promote green jobs. I mean, that it's CE to
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
promote economic development by establishing green jobs.
So given that, are you saying that you don't want that policy?
I'm saying we don't, yeah, I mean, how would it just doesn't seem in the realm of.
The possibility.
Well,
Well, the staff's feedback is this city is not a job center. It's not a job creator or surrounded by it. So the economic development element adopted in the comprehensive plan reflects that. It's more of a neighborhood serving residential community of people that commute to jobs. But the economic development flavor and the climate policies should focus more on that local home occupations, getting people out of cars, promoting neighborhood commercial, corner commercial, that type of thing that is available to the small community.
And it seems like promoting green job creation could be within the city's feasibility, but the city will not be the one creating those jobs.
Yeah, I've seen cities adopt policies where they would attend regional bodies and say, hey, this doesn't apply to our little burg, but hey, go for it. You know, that kind of thing, but this is more centered on.
Well, and just supporting businesses through some of these existing tactics of. If you are going to be creating green jobs in our community, the city would like to help you do that.
Yeah, but that's the basis of compound. There's no area to do that.
Yeah.
There's critical areas, trees, residential, and very little opportunity. So South Gateway and neighborhood focus, the feedback we gave to Cascadia is neighborhood focus. It's the same thing, but smaller scale.
This is a nitpicky semantics thing. I'm not a huge fan in CE 2.1 of the language, making sure disadvantaged neighborhoods are not left out. Feels passive, and I don't know, I would like to see that be stronger language. I prefer when it's prioritizing disadvantaged neighborhoods or putting them at the forefront instead of saying like, oh yeah, just like make sure you don't leave them behind entirely.
So would you say rather than being left out, that they would be actually included?
Yeah, something that shifts it from a negative to a positive statement, so instead of like, don't leave them out. Something that implies actively including them instead.
Great feedback. Thank you.
I mean, the issue I did raise here in this section was that there are lots of these issues seem to be outsourced to community organizations. And what the city is doing is supporting them. I don't know what that means. So are they funding them? Are they? It's sort of an outsourced policy, right? I don't know that outsourcing is a bad idea, but don't we have to focus on what the city's role is in supporting them?
No, those are decisions. The comprehensive plan informs future decisions. Some of those are budget, some of those are capital improvement plan. The actions in the city decision are not in the comprehensive plan. The implementation chapter will lead towards those decisions, and it's a paring down of these policies. Policies are not a wish list, but they're comprehensive in the sense of let's address all the issues. The implementation chapter will start to focus on what are the priorities. That informs budgets, staffing, everything the city does, purchasing of fleet, and guides private development or public development. Right.
So this language is essentially saying that we'd like to encourage that collaboration with other organizations, because that is to the benefit to Lake Forest Park, especially if we can't afford to, or don't have the resources to implement a particular policy or a particular whatever.
Yeah.
The case way.
So often when we're writing an agenda bill to recommend spending money on X, we start at a high level and we say, these are the policies that support this decision. And we're pulling those policies from the comp plan, or we're framing them from development regulations. And then the ask is the actual action.
And I think you're noting that the partnerships with organizations can lend the city capacity and reach and expertise. So we're suggesting supporting organizations as that role for the city to get the most bang for their buck, if you will, with some of these policies. But if there is a more appropriate lever that you see for some of these, we're also open to that.
I think what I heard in your original comment was it's great to promote those partnerships and supporting community organizations, as long as it's not written in a way that lets the city off the hook for also doing the work the city needs to do, by just saying like, it says that we just need to have other people do it, so they should do that. Is that what
Yes.
you were getting at in the original?
Thank you. Yes.
Goal number 3.
Thanks. All right, here we go. Goal 3 is around flood and drought resilience. So here we're aiming to acknowledge the need for water storage, drought resilience, upgrade existing water infrastructure, addressing the vulnerability of transit systems, emphasizing collaboration. So directly addressing some of the gaps that we did find in the policy audit and adding a few more. So this is the first half of policies. Here, the policies get at integrating water conservation and protection into city planning, coordinating with water districts, plural, thanks for that comment, and explore collaboration with the Saving Water Partnership to provide financial incentives for residents and businesses to install water-saving technologies and systems, promote drought resilience and water efficiency in urban planning, collaborate with local partners to restore floodplains and improve stream and river connectivity. And then we've got our second half of policies split into the next slide. policies 5 through 8 here are to integrate flood resilience into planning and maintenance of that transportation infrastructure, collaborate with water districts and sewer districts to plan and implement resilience measures for critical infrastructure, partner with local agencies and organizations to apply sediment reduction techniques, enhance watershed stability, and support water quality and storage, and coordinate with land managers and community partners to implement erosion and landslide control techniques. Any feedback here about the goals, policies, missing content, feasibility?
Clarification question, for 3.1 and 3.3. We're talking about city planning and then we're talking about urban planning. Is there a difference between those two terms?
I think city planning is holistic kind of municipal plans, which can look a lot of different ways. The city long-term planning. Urban planning gets specifically towards the built environment, where we're looking at development, the use of different services, and water saving design strategies like low impact development along streetscapes.
That's really good. You're channeling my graduate school experience. That was really good.
That means a lot.
That was spot on.
That's great, because I didn't know that. I think I appreciate the comment 3.4 that there are articles and comments supporting evidence that flooding occurs beyond the FEMA identified floodplain zones. I'd like to know, I'd like to standardize that somehow, you know, that bring that into some existence that we can actually refer to it. Those maps or those additional, you know, like how do you, that's not something that, yeah, I say that.
Yeah, not in the comprehensive plan.
Right.
But we grafted it to a more local level, knowing that if you just look at the flood insurance rate map, there's only a couple places where there's 100-year floodplain. And Yanni spoke extensively on this. But there's other areas of localized flooding that are not 100-year or 500-year floodplain. And so we're trying to capture those at the policy level. And then a potential, well, something we're already doing that will be an implementation item and is already in development codes are the critical area mapping sources. The critical area map is a guide, but it's not a very detailed guide, and we're trying to make it as detailed as possible to better inform reviews and decisions, so that when we do site-specific ground truthing of all the types of critical areas, that we achieve accuracy. So it's that continuum: policy, implementation measure, development regulation applied to property, and the flooding at this level just needs to distinguish the FEMA firm map is not the only source.
I think we heard that one of the risks that you were concerned about in particular was erosion from flooding for some of that critical infrastructure. And for policy 3.6, we could add that word in, just add erosion to make sure that that's captured as opposed to inundation. And the vulnerability assessment is taking your feedback into account as well, so that more detailed information and feedback that we heard from you will be reflected in the text there, if not in more detail in the policies here.
Do you have to say that I found that goal 3's all the goals in well, goal 3, the policies are have the most teeth, I guess, in terms of our recommendations. And I only because anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm hoping that Yanni can help, but make any comments if there's anything that you see that needs to be added, Yanni.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate what I was getting at is that in these hilly kind of neighborhoods, you know, we don't have a lot of flood inundation. What we have are fast flows in our stream corridors, and the stream corridors are also where we tend to put sewer lines, roads, other things that we like to have them go, you know, downhill as easily as possible. So it's really, I mean, I think 3.5 kind of gets at it, but it doesn't really get at like, how do we think about even capital project like design to really plan for last year higher flows in, McAleer and Lion Creek, both of which have, major sewer lines running right next to them. And in the case of McAleer, road running right next to it. So that's what I was getting at. I'm not sure I have like language to offer, but I think that's far more relevant to us in terms of big impacts than the few places where we get like standing water, that type of flooding. I'm not saying that's not an issue. I'm just saying we're at bigger risk from major infrastructure damage along these creek corridors.
Thanks. It sounds like a little rework of 3.5 and or 3.6 to take that into account. Pause for a moment and move into goal 4. I think we're approaching 30 minutes or so left in this agenda item. Want to make sure we cover it all. So this goal around emergency response systems reflects that key climate impacts facing the city may create emergency conditions and may require specific planning to identify at-risk areas, manage waste, prevent impacts from power outages, and communicate in real time to community members about specific climate risks like air pollution. So here we've got measures to coordinate with local agencies to identify those risk areas and develop targeted response plans, develop a comprehensive waste management plan, encourage on-site energy storage and backup systems in homes and businesses, and collaborate with the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency and other regional partners to enhance air quality monitoring and provide community guidance. Pausing for feedback.
Somebody was saying something?
She just said she was pausing, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to reiterate what for number 4. You stated that the LFP comp plan does not currently, well, it's missing general smoke resilience policies, and I really appreciate that that's included here. We may be seeing a lot more smoke events. Given the administration's decisions.
I'm curious if there's something that goes either in or in partnership with 4.1. 4.1 is coordinating with local agencies to identify risks, develop response plans, and ensure access. I'm curious where partnered with that there is making sure that the community is aware of those plans, knows how to access those plans, knows their part in executing those plans, and whether there is a community engagement piece that is either missing within that or as a complementary piece of engaging others in, again, similar to the one earlier, not relying on the city to do it for them and just assuming like cities get it, but how are we engaging the community and being active participants in those plans?
And that goes overall, right? Not just.
Yeah, but specifically to like responding to emergencies.
Yes.
There is community engagement and education needs to be part of all of this, but specific to, do you know what to do and what to expect of the city when an emergency happens here? I think it's an important piece specific to core.
I totally agree.
And that may be a like, that's a implementation piece that doesn't belong at this level, but
No, I think it belongs. We do have a reference to equitable access to resources and communication here, and it sounds like the suggestion is to make that again more proactive and a little bit less passive in the policy language.
and I interpreted that piece as when the emergency happens, make sure that they have equitable access to whatever is happening, whatever the response is. But I think there's proactive before the emergency piece of it that I did not interpret in how it's currently written.
Which seems to be part of being resilient, right? It's
Yes.
that, yeah. Right.
What was that last comment? Sorry, I
Which
was
is
hard-
about resiliency, that if you don't wanna, you know, it's about building it, so people don't. People need to know what to expect, if there's a communications out, we need to all expect that there'll be A-frames out telling us something. But if we don't know they're gonna be A-frames out, we don't know where to look for them, then. We say the city failed us. And that maybe they did, or maybe they didn't.
And even things about, do people know, is Third Place Commons an official cooling station or not? Or is it just a place that people happen to go because they think that it might be a better place to be than at home? How are we communicating that before an extreme heat event? How are we communicating those things and those expectations to people? To increase the resiliency when it doesn't occur.
And who's moving forward with that, who's expected to retain that as a. You know, as a place where people can go because it's owned by a private. You know, so what influence does the city have to make sure that this is to go to? Anyway, those are just details.
This is great feedback.
Okay, number 5.
All right, number 5. This is our first greenhouse gas emissions reduction strategy. And mostly we've got a combination of current comp plan policies and new comp plan policies. In a couple of cases, we've recommended taking current comp plan policies and replacing them with policies with a little bit more detail about the policy lever and language in there that starts to get to how it would be implemented. The policies here are careful not to interfere with Measure I 2066, which was passed by ballot vote last year. And that says that we cannot disincentivize natural gas. So we're walking a line between wanting to encourage as much renewable energy and electricity as possible while not outwardly disincentivizing natural gas. There is strong alignment here with the climate action plan. And again, many policies came from the current comp plan. So this slide has our recommended policies. There's also a summary of the current comp plan policies that we recommended removing and replacing on the next slide. And that is also in the list of policies in the meeting packet that you received. So really, we have kept the content of the policies. It appears somewhere in our climate element. We've just recommended removing them and adding a little bit more detail or sometimes separating them and putting them in different places. So there isn't anything that we've deleted altogether from the current comp plan. It's just a little easier to remove and replace the policies with different wording than to mark them up. Any comments, feedback about this section?
So for me, EQ 5.2. The language encourage reduced energy demand, greater resilience on sustainable energy sources. I always have an issue with the word sustainable because it is very open-ended. I'm wondering if we want some more clarification there versus the word sustainable.
And this is one where looks like that is a current comprehensive plan policy that we've actually recommended removing and replacing. The policies we recommended to replace that one are the new CE 5.5 and 5.6.
Oh, I see that. Okay.
So I would tend to agree with you on that point.
I see. Yeah, I see what you're doing there. Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Great.
attempting to pull information from the recesses of my brain from a former meeting, so I could be, I'm off base on this. As I recall from the inventory, a significant portion of the impact, I believe from city buildings was refrigerants. Is that something that your interpretation of 5.2 includes as something that should be reduced, or is that something that needs to be called out in there in addition to renewable energy sources and reducing energy use? Or is there a reason that's not in there?
You could call that out specifically, yeah. You could interpret it as being part of a few of these measures, but I think we could call it out. In most cases, there aren't direct replacements of refrigerants with electric appliances or systems, so that would need a separate effort to really address it.
I'm thinking just not necessarily replacing, but like encouraging minimal use of refrigerants. Something along that path. I don't know exactly how it would fit here, but.
So for 5.3, strike out. The new languages and advocate for clean energy projects in Washington. Would it be helpful to provide an example of a clean energy project in Washington?
Yeah, definitely. I think that could.
Wind farm, PSA, all the solar farms that you could buy into. It's a lot of TSE programs.
Right. Have it off. This will be-
That's urgent.
we don't have this screen.
Move forward. Okay, goal number 6.
All right. Goal number 6 gets to reducing driving and enhancing alternate transportation options. Here, there's a big focus on micromobility, so solutions that take people from their homes or services or neighborhood amenities to transit and back, kind of those last mile solutions. So we've got a few measures that get to creative mobility options, mobility hubs in the town center, bicycle rack and locker capacity, a regional or connected to Shoreline and Kenmore electric bicycle and scooter program, education and outreach about transit travel options, safe routes to school, and a complete multimodal network. So here, knowing that there are some public transit initiatives happening, we haven't outright said that we'd like to add public transit options to the mix here. We can if you'd like to support that, but really aiming to work on that first mile, last mile, and make travel a little bit more straightforward. The next goal also focuses on development to encourage, to make walking and biking a little bit more comfortable and easy. Oh, it's two goals ahead. We've got one focused on development. So that kind of land use planning to support multimodal transportation is addressed in goal 8 later on. But for now, we'll stick with goal 6. Any feedback here?
I sometimes I do wonder if we emphasize town center too much. Like what could be another local hub area for Lake Forest Park? And I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can answer that question, but I'm curious. So I'm just looking at 6.7. including the town center, but what other? I mean, you include transit stations, parks, trails. Just a question I haven't answered for myself.
Good question.
And that goes for, 6.2, that goes for anywhere that we are emphasizing town center.
I had the same question, how do you create a mobility hub in a place you don't know? Or maybe you're changing the city hall to a mobility hub. That's his
Yeah.
answer. I mean, it's just. But I don't think there are other places where the public transportation is as centralized as it is at the town center, because you can go to Kenmore or Seattle or Shoreland and sort of that nexus.
Mobility hubs in the town center also directly aligns with the climate action plan. So we almost borrowed that language and put that in a policy here. But I think mobility hubs can look a lot of different ways. The goal is to just put infrastructure so that it's easy for people to plug in their EV or their e-bike, store their bike, get on their bus to go where they need to go. So all of that infrastructure is convenient.
We move on to goal 7.
I have a
Oh, go ahead.
question, so 6.1. I'm encouraging or collaborating with King County Metro on providing creative mobility options specifically for underserved populations. That one to me seems like a valiant goal. I'm in agreement. I want this to happen in our city, but to me, it feels more tailored towards equitable transportation and not necessarily the climate impacts of getting people to use their cars less. Because in my experience, the person you have to convince not to drive is not underserved populations. It's people with multiple cars in the home who don't feel the immediate impacts of fuel costs and are able to cover the expense of private transportation more easily. If you have to convince me not to drive to the town center and to take the bus here, when it's easier for me to get in the car, not convince someone who doesn't have a car or can't afford a car or can't afford to drive or fill their gas tank, not to drive to the town center. So it feels like a goal that needs to be in the comp plan, but doesn't to me feel like it's the right goal to be in this part of the comp plan.
I really appreciate that remark. Thank you.
Okay, support.
That's 6.1.
I would just add that environmental justice is a major part of our grant funding this whole effort. In the Climate Commitment Act. So when I read that, it brings. Not as a purpose, but that reflects the Climate Commitment Act.
I wonder, Alexander, if we can bring this policy back to Fair and Peers. They are our transportation and multimodal experts, and they, of all people, would be able to tell us how impactful this policy is in achieving our goals.
Yeah, that sounds great, Maddie. So I'll flag that, Victoria, as a potential follow-up for us to work with Fair and Peers, and maybe there could be an addition of a policy. So to Mark's point, we are making sure that vulnerable populations have access to those services, and we're also enabling folks with more cars in their household to make different choices.
I think the good news is here, this policy is already approved, so I think it's just kind of a quick question to determine where it will go, but this is a current comp plan policy, whether it stays where it is in the transportation chapter or moves on over to the climate chapter. So if we ultimately decide that it adds more clutter than it's worth here, it seems to distract from the policies that seem higher priority, it will still be in that other chapter.
So I'm curious if there are things that are missing from this piece as well, because my recollection, scrolling back up to the wedge graph, was no matter how far I zoom in on those spotted sections, I cannot see the green portion of it, which seems to be transportation. So there are 7 of these. My question is, are they actually making any dent towards the goal, or is there something else missing that would make that green slice even visible on a graph? And I don't know what to do with that question. But that's the tide through that is coming to my mind from the first portion of this presentation.
That's a great question. We do more of our policies here are related to transportation than any other topic. We've got reducing driving here. We've got our transition to EVs and goal 7, and then we've got our development oriented goal and goal 8. So that's quite a few bases covered, and I think we should connect internally. I'd like to chat with Alicia about what her assumptions were among these categories. I know also this is a place where we are seeing a pretty big impact from federal and state policies. There's a huge green chunk of impact from the Washington zero emission vehicle standards. So it could be that that's coming into play too. But I do think that's probably worth connecting and seeing what our assumptions are there, because transportation policies cover so much ground in this climate element.
Yeah, that's where the disconnect was. Like it felt like there were a lot of things here, but then I wasn't seeing it represented in our expectations of what they will actually do.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. All right, let's move to number 7. Here we're facilitating a transition to electric vehicles, and our 3 pillars here are basically community electric vehicle charging infrastructure and education, a city fleet transition to electric vehicles, and a transition to electric off-road equipment that can include landscaping equipment, construction equipment, and other machinery that doesn't use roads. So we'll pause here for feedback.
I could just get stuck on determine funding and priorities to facilitate a city fleet transition to electric vehicles.
It is pretty soft language. We're getting at a city fleet transition plan. We could strengthen that to say transition city vehicles to electric as fast as is feasible or upon replacement. City staff had a few hesitations about committing to a very quick transition, thinking about wanting to prioritize public safety, knowing that some electric vehicles aren't on the market yet, and there are some pretty specialized uses of city fleet vehicles. But I think we can still get to that idea and say as fast as feasible, and city staff can let us know what feasibility means in this case.
I could be on both sides of that, though. I could say, I want stronger language, but I could also say, what's the feasibility of that? Like, can we, I don't want to strap the city of Lake Forest Park on a commitment that they can't meet.
On the other hand, the Climate Action Plan does actually commit the city to transitioning their city fleet to electric by 2035. So they're quite a bit more ambitious than we've been in this policy here.
I have less of an issue with whether it's kind of firm enough, but to me, it feels like it's written as like step 1 of the implementation plan. Instead of being an overarching, like,
Maybe that's
where are we headed? It feels like the first step towards where we want to head is to do this one thing, and once it's done, it's checked off, and there's no reason it's in here anymore.
Good point.
Great point.
The other thing is, this is so small potatoes, but the other off-road things are, what are those things that go on the water and make a lot of noise?
Jet skis.
By the time, they're individual ones.
Jet skis.
Jet skis. Jet skis Those kinds of things are also included in this category, and we have a lot of waterfront.
Yeah, maybe just clarifying, I think that the scope is, I don't know, are there city operated jet skis? I'm assuming not.
I wish there were. I really wish there were.
Be out there.
So Sarah, just to clarify to your point, this
Public
seven,
safety. Yeah, public safety.
And noise. Noise ordinances. That's all.
NEMCO and the fire department and so forth, so agencies, yeah.
Okay, just 20 to 9, so just maybe we move over to the lake.
Speed along here. So 8 is around development that advances climate planning, resilience, and greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So here we're looking at concentrating development in areas well served by transit, implementing complementary mixed use zoning, reducing parking minimums near transit-oriented development, and supporting developments that use clean energy or reduced energy consumption. And it sounds like there are some codes around reducing parking minimums that we could consider aligning with more closely.
Yeah, and for goal number 2, your rationale, the majority of Washington cities, including Lake Forest Park, are zoned single family. That is no longer true.
Okay.
Zoned for, by law, we are no longer zoned for single family. So I don't know how much that impacts that goal.
You can use low density residential
Yeah.
in advance, 4 weeks in advance.
8.3 again to me feels like a box to be checked instead of a goal to guide policy. I'm not sure if there is something broader that would kind of zoom it out, because again, that feels like one of the implementation steps towards encouraging transit use. I don't know if you agree with that interpretation.
No, my mind is all on the far end of regulations. You know, and what we're now mandated to do for middle housing and accessory dwelling units, and then actually. Before the meeting, we're a year late on Senate Bill 6015. There's a lot of legislation, but it's all development regulations, and so when you say broader policy to capture that
I'm talking
umbrella.
8.3 parking minimums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I know the implementation measures, but the language for broader policy in that regard. Can't think of. I'm over here. Eliminate, minimize, you know, that kind of thing. They passed a new transit-oriented development bill this session. That's another example, but that's all regulation.
I mean, there's something around like support or encourage policies that provide opportunities for parking or things around transit hubs. So I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm not at my best on my wordsmithing right now. But it seems like reducing parking minimums feels very specific in the action that we're recommending instead of an option to assess and encourage multiple options for achieving this outcome.
My wordsmithing brain is tired too, but we've logged this feedback and we'll.
I think we have a suggestion.
If it's appropriate, I'm not a member, but okay, but I know this year also in the legislature, there was a bill that would have, that we're exempt from, but that other cities would have to eliminate parking minimums. And I don't know if it's worth, even though it's not mandated, worth moving this in that direction for transit oriented things, if that's. If and maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're responding to, but is the point that that's too specific, or is it that it's not bold enough, or?
To me, it was feeling too specific.
Okay.
in
Maybe that's not
relation
helpful.
to the other things throughout that are predominantly around like fostering and supporting, and this one felt more like a reduce it. That's, you did it.
Well, like you said, it seems like an implementation, an immediate implementation.
I think
Very well.
parking minimums is one of our few policies here that has the twin goal of freeing up space for denser development or green space that could be spent on, would have been spent on parking, and also disincentivizing vehicle use near transit. Two sides of the coin.
The other policy thing that comes in around parking minimums is that people talk about just incorporating the price of parking, not that all parking is free. And that if there are ways to sort of price that in as part of the process, that may be taken up to that higher level.
Yeah, there's a lot of research on the cost of vehicles and parking. Yeah, right. There's a cost to the environment, there's a cost to just a financial cost. Yeah. Anyway, yes.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Perhaps Maddie, you can work
So
on
thoughts
that.
on that.
Well, I like that second part, the non-bold part of the sentence. That's related to the climate element policies, so
Yeah.
maybe some work on the bold part.
Great. And with just 15 minutes left to 9, let's scoot to goal 9, reduce waste generation and increase recycling. So here we recommend setting and achieving specific goals around waste generation and measurement via waste characterization study in partnership with waste collection service provider. Focus on reducing disposal of high emissions materials such as organic waste and paper. Consider food rescue policies. Support equitable outreach and engagement around waste reduction, recycling, and composting. And facilitate the city's 70% recycling goal and expand current recycling efforts.
The vehicle for this, some of these things is the franchise agreement. I don't know if that's. You could require a certain number of things in your franchise agreement. Maybe that. I don't know how that exactly fits in, but instead of.
Well, I think that goes to the details of the implementation. I think that's a good point, but it's. There's not, are you suggesting there's a policy around?
Smart franchise agreements.
Sounds like a great implementation detail.
Smart enough.
Smart enough.
Any other comments about goal number 9? Yes.
It's the first time I've heard of food rescue policies. Will there be a box that explains what that is?
I was just reading through this and realizing that that is a really brief sentence right there in the policy. But yes, we can explain what that is. It could be any kind of policy that the city would use to support food recovery networks. Could be requiring certain types of businesses to rescue food. It could be supporting food banks and pantries or other distributors, or kind of implementing that by creating connections between donors and food rescue organizations.
Thanks. There's a huge movement in New York, I believe, on food rescue initiatives. It's a bigger city.
Less compost.
No, composting is mandatory in New York.
New York has pioneered composting systems.
Yeah.
Or at least
Okay.
legislation. All right. Well, thanks for your input. I know We are aiming to get the next draft of policies back to you by the 27th. We'd love to hear any further comments that you have. I want to say by the end of the week, if you're able to, we can definitely pull those comments into the next draft of policies. It is a pretty quick turnaround, but let us know if additional time would be helpful.
My perfect.
And we'll see you back in June. to
Maddie, I'm
discuss.
sorry, I'm just thinking about the planning commission would love to see these recommendations sooner than later. So if we could get our comments in by the end of the week, next week, as you've requested originally. Without additional time.
Can you say that again, David? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just like what Maddie was saying, like, let's just promise to have our comments in, if you're all willing, have those in by the end of next week.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, just confirming by the 16th, Maddie?
That would be ideal if possible.
Okay, and David, I want to make sure I didn't miss an action item. Was there something about the planning commission specifically?
No.
Okay.
Stacy, we should connect, the tree board was planning to review this, and Stacy and I were going to go over where all of this stands at our next tree board meeting, but it's 2 days after the next CPAD meeting. So Stacy, we should connect on if there are ways we can get some of this in front of tree board folks between now and then.
Yeah, we can probably send a summary.
It's the climate action committee meets the day after.
And Maddie, one other thing, I think we were saying to have our comments in by the 16th, but it's actually the 23rd, is that correct?
I'm hoping by the 16th.
Oh, by it's the end of this week. Okay.
I know
Okay,
it's quick.
we got you. Okay.
Okay. Great, and then we can yeah, keep working with y'all. If you do need like another day or two, just let us know. And then Victoria and Stacy, if you want to follow up about how to get tree board engagement, we're happy to work with you on that.
And Sarah.
Yeah, and then Sarah, just confirming what I heard was that the Climate Action Committee next meeting is on June 2nd. Is that correct?
Second or third?
Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Yes, third.
Okay.
And CAC's the third,
Tree board.
tree board on the 4th might be canceled
Interesting. It's now.
because of the interviews, if I'm getting the dates wrong.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we're having our council interviews. Yeah, potentially, so
Potential.
I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe we should have a joint meeting.
Oh,
Maybe the tree board should come to the CIC meeting and
like that.
go over that.
Intriguing. Would we, so if we were to have a joint meeting, if we get everyone to agree to it, on the 3rd to discuss things and get any final thoughts or feedback on pieces of this from that group, is that way too late to give you any information or feedback?
Can you say the date again, Victoria?
June 3rd.
Planning commission.
The 10th.
I think, I mean, Maddie, you can jump in if you want, on the June 3rd date. So just as a reminder, we're hoping to submit, the city will be submitting the full review draft of the climate element to Commerce on June 13th, I believe, Mark.
Yeah, that can still take place because that's a separate timeline, right? They need to exist, they need to be draft, and that's for the Commerce Grant.
Right.
Similar to how we did the comp plan last January, February, and March, we also go to the committees and get input. That conversation can continue, and if we start that early in the beginning of June, that doesn't harm what we will send to Commerce. It'll cause a little bit more work in the sense that you'll be on track for deliverables to Commerce as you're getting feedback. But if the feedback is the first 2 weeks and it's not incorporated into the Commerce work, that's fine. Because we're going to be talking with these boards and commissions for 2 months.
Yeah.
Including the planning commission. So it will evolve.
Yeah, great. So
And tree board CAC will inform the planning commission as well. So it's not like all the feedback has to be June 3rd and incorporated and sent to Congress.
right. Yeah, so I think just to restate, I think what you're saying, Mark, is that there's two sections of feedback, right? So tree board, climate action committee, planning commission, like we want to think through like what are the critical pieces of feedback that need to be included before the review draft goes to Commerce. And then like what are the like refinements, the tweaks, the continued edits that we can make in the like review window that happens basically June 15th through the summer as the review draft goes through its more formal, like we'll have a public comment process, we'll have more time to make any additional tweaks that need to be made. So that, I don't know if, does that help? Is that clear to y'all?
Because the key dates don't change for Commerce. June 2nd CPAT, June 13th for Commerce, deliverables, we get reimbursed. So that's the primary track. The rest are 2-3 months.
So does it seem like it makes sense to try to combine CPAT or CAC and tree board for next month?
Yeah, I'm all for
From
less
your side?
meetings, but not for what we need to give to Commerce,
Yeah,
but to
but
start
for
that
next steps on
awareness.
internal refinement and review.
Yeah.
Are you the person to coordinate seeing if that can happen or delegate that to someone on your team?
It's already happening to some extent on tree board through Councilmember Goldman.
Okay.
And so I would add the suggestion about a combine on that date. That would also, between now and
Wonder if you will
Monday,
communicate that to
Well, no.
Councilmember Goldman?
because we're reserving dates in June for middle housing.
Okay.
So that, I think that is more of a, is everyone available type thing, but I love the combined one date.
My question is, who is figuring out if everyone's available and communicating this to Councilmember Goldman and whoever is scheduling?
I will
I
take,
assume that's-
I will take care of that.
Great.
So if we could continue that conversation after the meeting. So
And by email, yeah.
and by email. Alexander, it seems to me that we have discussed the survey process. Well, not, excuse me, not the process so much, but we did discuss the survey information. And we kind of recapped the open house a bit. I'm wondering if you're comfortable with jumping to B in old business.
Yes, definitely. The only addition I wanted to just add on the survey is that we are working on a full engagement summary that will be submitted to the city in the summer. So we're incorporating the results of the survey now, and then a full engagement summary for all of the engagement methods will be provided to the city later this year. So yeah, definitely, David. Okay, on to the action items. Yes. So I think just a quick recap on the screen here. These are the action items that we captured for the April meeting. So thank you all for providing your input on the greenhouse gas summary memo. Thanks so much for joining the open house. Sarah, Mimi, Victoria, yeah, and Councilmember Furutani, love to see you there, and that was great. These are all complete. We're working to incorporate the input that you all provided into the vulnerability assessment and in policy development, and we'll continue to do that. And then I'll just review, which is not on the screen, just what I heard for action items from tonight's meeting. So CPAT members, y'all will provide input on the draft goals and policies by May 16th. Stacy and Victoria will follow up about getting input from tree board. Sarah will follow up about getting input from climate action committee. And then city staff, you'll coordinate with council member Goldman, tree board and climate action committee on timing for a joint meeting. And then on the project team side, we'll plan to send the full climate element and those revised goals and policies to the CPAT on May 27th. Am I missing any action items?
If you don't mind, I'd like to see an action item for when these recommendations will be handed over to Planning Commission.
Planning Commission.
That's appropriate.
Yeah, I think, Mark, does it make sense to have the recommendations going to Planning Commission at the same time as they're delivered to Commerce?
Yeah, we kind of leaked it last night that that's June 10th.
Okay, so that would be June 13th.
No, June 10th. And just in material form, not necessarily presentation, but just, you know, an introduction. This is what's coming kind of thing.
And maybe some key questions, guidelines.
We could develop it.
Okay.
There's also some scheduling and contract issues and availability.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if we kick it off with CAC and tree board, June 10th is a possibility for me to do something at planning commission.
Okay.
Look
Okay.
at it, introduction or preparation at least. Yeah.
Introduction or, okay, because we're working towards that June 13th deadline mark.
Yeah. You and I will focus on June 2nd and June 13th.
Okay. Great. Okay, any other action items to capture?
Just one other question, just because it's council related. So do we wait for the DOC review to come back before planning commission makes the recommendations to council?
This will require 60-day Department of Commerce review. And generally, we do not start that until planning commission is at least comfortable, whether it's a straw poll or a strong consensus.
So I don't have to schedule anything for a July meeting or an August meeting then, of the council?
No,
Right.
not
Okay.
for climate.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, we'll be doing Commerce 60-day review and then the SEPA presumed DNS.
And is our last meeting the June meeting?
That's for this body. That's the last regular meeting anticipated, but there's a role of going back to your boards and commissions. And then if needed, reforming to reinform or fix or revise. So the summer is available.
Let's post that on our agenda for next week as well. Or excuse me, the next meeting.
Okay. To determine the CPAT roles in the summer.
Attention. And the next meeting being June 2nd.
Great.
Attend.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing. We're looking forward to meeting with y'all again in a couple of weeks on June 2nd. But I'll turn it back over to you, David.
Yeah, just thank you for the work that you've done, Maddie. That was a great presentation on the goals. So I appreciate that.
Thanks so much for your input. A lot of great suggestions. Appreciate your engagement this evening and throughout.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second. We're out of here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Right, screw this up. There we go.